Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I will get into today's video. My topic today is Jehovah's Witnesses, dating, and marriage, which I consider to be a very toxic way of getting into relationships, and I will tell you why and give some examples of why I feel this way. So, if you are a Jehovah's Witness, it's very much you cannot have sex before marriage. Outside of marriage, no go. You have to be married, and that is the only way that you should go about it if you want to be seen as pleasing to God. I have no issue with this. If that's your decision, good for you. Go for it. Do it. The Jehovah's Witnesses will they will micromanage you. I I don't know what a good way to put it is, but if you are, especially if you are young and you are dating and seeking a marriage partner, you must have chaperones. So, usually both parties have Jehovah's Witness family who will make sure that you are never alone together, which I think that's an important part of starting a romantic relationship if you're pursuing marriage is you have to be alone together, and that's when you discuss things and just get to know each other, but you are not allowed to do that. So you constantly are surrounded by people while you are dating as a Jehovah's Witness. And I know many who, of course, found a way to be alone, and then they either told on themselves or they were caught. And then it's a judicial committee meeting. And usually, if it's a very common thing that happens, so usually, if it's a first time offense and a couple goes too far while alone together, they're reproved publicly, usually, or if they're a pioneer or a ministerial servant or an elder, then they're removed from that, so you basically know what happened. Um, so as a Jehovah's Witness, you are not allowed to marry a non-Jehovah's Witness. But you can. You'll just be pulled into a judicial committee meeting, and so they take a scripture that says to marry only in the Lord, which means somebody who believes in God and is a God-fearing person. But my point of this is it very much lowers your dating pool. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness, then you're only allowed to date other Jehovah's Witnesses if you don't want to be ostracized in the congregation or potentially disfellowshipped. So it's very toxic. You have to find another Jehovah's Witness, which there's what's the count up to in the world right now? 9 billion people, and there's only about 8 million, I think almost 9 million Jehovah's Witnesses according to them. So there's not a ton of options, and I know in the area I live especially, not a ton of options, good options. So I'm single, not putting that out there for I'm happily single at the moment, and I'll leave it at that. So I'm just saying I've never been married to a Jehovah's Witness. I've never been married. And this is a lot of this has to do with why I haven't been married, I think. But I'm only kind of just waking up to that. So yeah, they usually marry very young because, as I mentioned, you're only allowed to have sex if you are married. So I know so many who, shortly after adulthood started looking for somebody to marry and got married. The primary reason being that they wanted to have sex, and that was how they could do it. And I know so many unhappily married Jehovah's Witnesses. It makes me very sad. I was friends with the couples, a lot of couples, because there aren't many single people, because witnesses typically marry as soon as the first fresh piece of meat walks in the door, to be quite frank. And yeah, I knew so many who had been married for years and they were just unhappy. So I'll go into um, that next point. So, as a Jehovah's Witness, divorce is a huge no no. So they take scripture and say, if you have a spouse that was unfaithful who cheats on you, then you are free to remarry, or you're free to divorce and remarry. Um, you can divorce. You're going to be looked down upon and ostracized, but you can divorce out besides that for other reasons, but you are not free to remarry a person. And if you get married again, then that's going to turn into a whole big thing. And uh, probably a judicial committee. I don't know. I've never been down that road. Um, but yeah, so they're just, it's marriage as a Jehovah's Witness is tough because, like I said, they often marry young. I know so many who, if they were being completely honest, would have wished they did not get married that young. They didn't get married for the right reasons. Um, so, funny story, I'll just tell this story quick. I know of somebody. So, this is how weird some Jehovah's Witnesses can be. So, there's a couple who were older, retirement age, and lost spouses, evidently, like around the same time, evidently started talking. And so, I'm talking they're in their 60s, 70s years of age. So, at that point in life, if you can't control your urges and you're not that devoted to your beliefs in religion that you can't control yourself to save yourself until you get married, so they're free to remarry. I guess that's one other way you can get out of marriage and remarry as a witness, is if your spouse dies, which if you're younger, you don't think of that too much. Anyway, so they were asking around for chaperones, which people were kind of like, what? You're like old. Why are you asking for chaperones? So they only dated a few months and got married, and they said it was because they couldn't find chaperones. That they would ask people and they wouldn't chaperone them, and so they just had to get married to not break God's law. So yeah, so this is how Jehovah's Witnesses behave, and it is very bizarre. And I know so many people who, even when they were dating young, said it was so awkward because they would, you want to go on a date and you want to be alone and get to know somebody, but you would have other people there all the time, and it was so awkward. And many people have stated that. And it was something that shied me away from dating, to be honest. To think, like, I, yeah, I Jehovah's Witness dated somebody which means we mostly texted and made plans to hang out with people for several months, and then we went on a group vacation together. So I actually spent a lot of time with her and learned that we weren't compatible. But it's funny, like even Jehovah's Witnesses will consider, like, if you're just texting with somebody, dating, where I think most people who aren't witnesses would say you're just texting, so you're kind of just friends. We didn't talk, like we hadn't made, we weren't like serious yet, but things were, we were considering some conversations that came up that made it obvious that we were both interested. But dating as a Jehovah's Witness is very awkward, and the whole process from dating to marriage as a Jehovah's Witness is very awkward. And then one last thing I'll throw in there is Jehovah's Witness weddings. So it's funny. There are all sorts of types of Jehovah's Witness weddings that I have been to. So some will not serve alcohol. It's a pretty boring, dull event. So you have that spectrum, and then all the way to the other end where they'll kind of cherry pick who they invite, and it'll be the biggest party and fun and more like what you would think of a wedding celebration. So it's but as a Jehovah's Witness, you constantly have to be worried about offending people, which I definitely fell into that camp for a long time, where it was like, you felt like you had to walk on eggshells around certain people. And yeah, everything I had observed, I'd been a chaperone many times for people. I'd been to many Jehovah's Witness weddings, and it was just all so awkward and so different from what you would think of like a normal, if you're not a witness and you observed how they dated. And some Jehovah's Witness weddings I've been to, you'd be like, yeah, this is weird. this is weird. So anyway, that's my little rant and video for the day. Happy Friday, everybody. Have a good day. Have a good weekend. Take care.